Hey, all right, everyone. This is Eric K1ELG coming at you. And if you're like me, you just acquired a BTech DX2 DMR radio, and probably are new to DMR, like many of us, and might be wondering how to get started with it. I'm going to go in and show you how I've connected my DMR radio to my SharkRF OpenSpot, which you probably see here in the background. This particular BTech radio is pretty neat. It's got several thousand channels and capability to zone things and whatnot. So I'm going to just dive right in here and show you how I've set up my particular channels, and you can do it manually. So you can see this is based on a code plug file, but you can do this manually, and I'm going to dive right in there. So I've got OpenSpot set up on the Pacific Northwest Brandmeister network, and I'm using several of the TAC channels as well as the nationwide channels, and I've essentially set those up by channels, and each channel ties me to a specific talk group that's off of the repeater, in this case the OpenSpot. So I'm basically doing a simplex connection to my OpenSpot, and then based on the channel I'm choosing a particular slot and a particular talk group that I want to chat on. And it's pretty easy. You can come in, and so for example, if I want to connect over to Washington 1, I can just go ahead and key up on my OpenSpot, and it'll connect that. And then I can listen in based on the settings that I have in the radio. So I'm going to go into the menu here. Hopefully you can see the menu options. If not, I'll have to change the video out. But you can see in your main menu here, you have contacts, you have messages, call log, your zones, the scan list that you can set up, as well as the settings menu. So you're interested in going to the settings menu, and instead of radio settings, you're going to go to channel settings, and we're just going to walk the settings for this particular channel. So the channel type obviously for DMR is digital, and your transmit power you generally want to leave on turbo. I have my transmit power set to my P2 button on the side, so I can change power levels pretty easily. It doesn't really hurt the OpenSpot for me to transmit turbo over to it, and it works out pretty well. Bandwidth, obviously you want narrow for DMR so that you can get the 12.5 megahertz spread there. And then for receive and transmit frequency, I'm using 445 in my area, but you can set whatever simplex frequency you need for your particular area, so you're not clashing with any kind of other repeaters in the area. Same thing for transmit. Since I'm transmitting out on a typical repeater, DMR repeater, your receive frequency and transmit frequency would be at the standard offsets. Talk around is if you want to actually talk around locally on the repeater instead of actually going out through the talk group. I'm going to set the talk around to off. And so, you know, that is one setting that I could say I'm using firmware version 1.02, and I know there's a 1.03. I haven't tried it yet, but getting the talk around settings to stick on the code plug has been a little bit of an issue for me. And you can see the settings menu will time out after a few seconds, so sometimes you have to go back into the settings menu and just make sure that you have actually selected that setting. The name is obviously the channel name, no surprises there. Transmit allow, you know, a lot of people tend to set this to always, but you really want to be set to the same color code of the repeater. Otherwise, many repeaters are set to open channels in larger groups, and that's never a good thing, right? So same color code is usually the safe way to go. You can actually set transmit prohibit on and off, no need to do that. In my area, I've set my OpenSpot to color code 1. Again, if you're on a repeater, you can set to whichever color code that repeater supports. And in the time slot that I want to use, in this case I'm using time slot 1 on this particular talk group. Digital encryption almost always off unless you're on a commercial radio. Amateur doesn't use that. Encryption type wouldn't matter in that case because the encryption is set to off. And in my receive group list, you can go in and you can set various group lists that you want to listen to. So I've got my OpenSpot talk group set on a receive group list, and this allows me to receive the other talk groups on this channel while I'm actually leveraging it and listening in. So I actually will select that current list, and you can go in and you can set up your your groups. You can add a group in here. So if you select add a group, you'll see all the different contacts that you have, and you can add and delete them to the group. You'll see if I go into remove group, I've got a couple of groups that I can remove if I'm interested in doing that. And then work alone, I usually set this to off. I'm not using the radio alone. Channel measurement is also set to off. And obviously DMR mode, you'll set to simplex if you're using a hotspot or a repeater. There is the ability to use double slot, which is essentially like a talk around mode, but for all intensive purposes, you're probably going to be simplex or repeater mode. And then once that's all set, you're good to go on that particular channel. So I'll go back onto that channel. I actually have my GPS turned on. That's what that little red icon is up there. And once I key up, my OpenSpot will actually connect to that. And I can actually go ahead and scan while I'm on that channel. I can go in, select the scan list that I want to do. So in this case, I'll take the channel scan list that I set up for the OpenSpot. And then once that's selected, I could go ahead and turn the scan on. And it will actually scan the talk groups that I have in my scan list while it's actually monitoring the talk group that I selected. So pretty easy to get started. It's not too bad once you learn it. You will see that T1 or T2, depending on the channel that you're on, is set. The other thing, stop the scan, you can just key up real quick, and that will help you navigate to the different channels. It will resume scanning once you're back. So if you do want to stop the scan list, you can go into the menu, just click on it, and it'll stop the scan. But you can see, either T1 or T2 for the slot that I've got selected. Another thing that you might be wanting to do is actually set your talk groups in here. So if you come into contacts on your main menu, you can go into your contacts list, and you'll see all the different talk groups that are actually set up on your radio. So if I select one, like this is Brandmeister North America, you'll see if I actually view the contact, the only thing that's there is the talk group number and the actual name of the talk group. So any of these that I select, let's view something that's a little bit higher on the contact list. So if I go to TAC 310, for example, which is a pretty common one, and view that contact, you'll see just 310 is the actual number that's assigned here, and in the name. So you can you can add any that you need. You can just come in, go back, add a new contact, put in a name, right? And then obviously if you want to put in the private ID, you can. You can put the address, the state, the country, the remarks, ring setting, and then finally save it. So pretty easy to do, not very hard. Obviously you'd put in 310 and the name 310 if you wanted to actually do that, right? If you want to assign a call sign for your contact, you can do that. You can put in private contacts if you want. So if you have a particular friend that has a DMR ID, you can add them as a contact as well, so that you can set them as your talk group when you want to just key up. What I tend to do when I'm direct calling someone is I'll go into my my call log, and I'll look for the actual calls that I might have answered or missed if I'm calling someone back. So in this case, I haven't missed any calls today, but if I look at my last call list, I can see all the different callers based on their DMR ID. I can select that particular person, and when I key up the radio, it'll actually do a private call to them. So that's a pretty cool feature of the radio. Really like that it does that. And that's about it. It's not very hard. You can obviously assign all of your different channels to zones. So I've got a bunch of zones set up. In this case, I've got an OpenSpot zone. If I'm actually on the repeater, I have a Pacific Northwest DMR zone that has my local repeater set, and I've set zones for different counties. So I have both analog digital channels. So pretty easy. I can go into my my memory for the P1 area and basically just change the zone. So here I've got all my King County frequencies on there, and you can see if I change a channel, I'm at channel 1 through I guess 20 is on that particular zone. If I go to Alameda in California, I'm on channel 656 through 660. Again, in your code plug, you can set all the priority channels and your default channels there. So when you select zones, it's going to actually go to your default channel. So in this case, I've got VHF DMR simplex for ham nationwide set on this particular ham nationwide zone, and you'll see that I've got both DMR and analog channels in this particular zone. So that's the really cool feature of the zoning. If I want to talk to the International Space Station when the actual space station is overhead, I've got that set in the zone here, and you can set things up the way you like, obviously, in your code plug file, but that's how I've got it going. So hopefully that'll help you guys. I have been playing around with the short messaging features as well. That seems to be pretty straightforward. If you're looking to send out an SMS message, you can go into your menu, go to messages, type out a new message, so whatever that message is, and once you confirm that message, you can send it, and when you click send here, you can select any of your contacts, or you can manually dial and enter a DMR ID or otherwise, as long as your buddy has a radio that supports the SMS, and that seems to work pretty well. Kind of like that feature of the radio, makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, you can also set some drafts, and there are some quick test features. So you can set that in your code plug file if you have text that you generally send for status, if you're doing search and rescue or something like that. That might be super useful for you. But overall, pretty good radio, pretty amazing features. GPS pretty easy to work with. You turn it on and off, and you can get your GPS information. You can even edit it if you want to mess around with your location, and not send your exact location. There's the facility to do that on the radio. So really like some of those features. Hopefully this is giving you kind of an idea of how to get set up and running on your BTech 6X2, but really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. You can leave feedback, obviously, or comments or questions. Thanks again. Have a good one.